All right. Looks like you're live. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Hopefully everything sounds all right. All right. Looks like you're live. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Hopefully everything sounds all right. Cool. So we are looking good, sounding good. I'm gonna do my beginning of stream ritual just to make sure everything is working. And everything looks good. Cool. So welcome to a Friday song feedback stream. I'm really stoked to hear what you guys have been working on / are working on. And I think hopefully I got my mic issues all figured out. I got a few more experiments I need to run, but I think everything should be more or less working the way I think it is, and we won't have any technical issues like we did last week, which means I can get into lots and lots of tracks. Before we get too deep into it, I'm going to put the link for song sharing in the chat and pin it there. That way, if anybody wants to submit a song, they can just hit that link, paste their link in there, as well as any relevant info, and I will try to make sure I take a listen to it before the end of the stream. I should have plenty of time to get to everybody, though, depending on when people show up. Also, I have opened up song feedback submissions to people in the Discord early. So if you are not a member of the Discord and you want to kind of guarantee that your song gets a chance to be listened to on the stream, you can submit early through the Discord, which should be linked in the description below. So I believe there's one song already in there from the Discord, from the Savara, and I might wait a moment to see if they show up. And otherwise, I will go ahead and get started with that track. Let me pull this up. Cool, and we will go ahead and get started. Let me also make sure that the audio is working. Seems good.
Surrounded by walls and door, brought down at you, hands and feet all nailed to the floor, walking down the street, nobody, blown back by the wind, I deeply taking down to the wind, dark shapes of a jealousy, no insanity. I'm scary. The crowd is slipping away. In my head, in my head, in my head. Locked down anymore, surrounded by walls and doors. Locked down anymore, as I feel all vision is blurry. I'm falling. Chaos in my ears. I'm screaming. My chest is burning. I can't breathe. The life
Nice. That's a really interesting track, and I think there's a lot about this track that I really like, that I think is working really, really well. And I think that there are a number of like really minor, subtle things about this that I think could be improved a little bit. I think overall, I'm digging the vibe of it. It has this kind of like dreamy, poppy thing, but not being like too like mainstream pop music. It has this more kind of like indie pop kind of feel, which I think you did a really good job with. And I think the vocals sound really good. I don't know if it's him, J-Bro is on the vocals, or you're on the vocals, or whatever. Vocals sound really great. I think overall the vocal processing also sounds really solid. Let me kind of go through it chronologically and just kind of let you know the things that I'm noticing. Actually, before we get chronologically, the two biggest things I think I noticed were, number one, the mix could use a little bit of love. There's a few points in the song where you're being overwhelmed with sounds in not a good way. I think certain situations you want to overwhelm your listener with sounds, and other situations you wouldn't be overwhelmed in terms of creating a climactic feel to your song. And I think specifically this right here and this right here, when they kind of hit that climax, they both there's too many things going on and it becomes kind of muddled and a little bit distracted. So I think you could, with the mix, make things feel a little bit better that way. The other thing that really bothered me, and this is a really minor thing that probably most people won't notice, but it seems like you are switching a lot back and forth between a snap, a clap, and a snare. Now, both those sounds fulfill basically the same role in a song. It's kind of like the give and take to the kick. Hey Mike, how's it going? How you doing tonight? I was talking about Savaria's track here. So yeah, you start with a snap, and then you switch to a, then you switch to a clap, and then you are switching back and forth, and then later add in a snare. And to me, it felt a little chaotic because at some points I could predict when there's going to be the clap versus the snap versus the snare, and other points it felt kind of random. So I think if you are going to be using all three of those elements in a song, make sure you're really intentional about which sounds are happening when and where. I also feel like the production on all three of those sounds could also use a little bit of love. Like the snap feels a little bit dry to me. Like it could use a little bit of reverb and maybe a little bit more processing to make it sound a little more kind of thick and rich like the rest of your song does. Whereas your clap is like way over processed, which has like a little bit too much reverb and a little bit too much of that processing going on there. And I think your snare, and I think the snare could also use a little bit more processing, so a little bit more reverb on that. So really be thinking about when you're using those sounds, where you're using those sounds, and making sure you're really intentional about it. It felt like sometimes the claps were using to accentuate the start of something, which felt logical and it made sense. And at other points, it just felt kind of random. So watch what you're doing there. And then other than that, I do feel like the bass line could use a little bit of love. Right now it feels a little basic, again, compared to the kind of rich production on the rest of the track. I kind of feel like a little bit of negative space. Like right now, all the bass notes just go right into the next bass note. And they kind of have a little bit of pluck at the start. So if you had maybe a little bit of silence in between each bass note, it might help it feel a little more rhythmic and a little bit more interesting. But yeah, I like what you're doing with all the vocals and background layers, and a lot of your synth work is really, really nice. And then, like I said, you get to this section here, and it just becomes a little overwhelming, and it just is, there's so many things going on, and the vocals get lost in the mix. Mike, if you want to, the link should be pinned to the top for tossing a track into the spreadsheet if you want to share something. So right over here, Same thing, the bass line still feels a little boring. I feel like the bass line should change from the intro. And you have this synth that is competing with your vocals, which makes the vocals feel less powerful because they're fighting for my attention with this other main melody synth you have going on. Also, a lot of your like white noisy things also feel a little bit loud in the mix. Like they're doing their job, but they're a little bit too present, which makes it hard to hear all the other important sounds like the vocals and synth parts that are happening. Like right here, for example, the main thing I'm noticing is that synth part, which is a cool synth part, but if you have vocals, vocals should be one of the main focuses, if not the like 100% main focus. So I feel like the vocals getting a little lost in the mix there. This part I love. This part was super dope. Way into it. Same thing here. Your noise sweeps are too loud, which is making the vocals hard to hear. Yeah. Yeah, those are mostly the things I feel like need to work. The snare, snap, clap situation, both in terms of processing as well as which sounds are happening when, could use a little bit of love. A little bit of the mix just to make sure you can really hear the vocals, and switch up the bass line a little bit. The bass line is working for me. Maybe keep it the same for the intro, but during the more kind of like energetic parts, I feel like the bass should do something a little bit different, just to give it a little bit more variety, and it gets a little bit repetitive after a while. Those are the main things, but like I said, other than that, a lot of your synth work is really nice. The arrangement makes a lot of sense. I love these little like piano things you have going on. But yeah, those are my main kind of piece of feedback on it. Hopefully that's useful for you. It looks like this has already been released, so maybe you can kind of take that and moving forward. Yeah, Tripathi, the link to the spreadsheet should be pinned at the top of the chat. So if you want to put a song in there, you are more than welcome to. Cool. Yeah, I think that's all I gotta say about this track. It's really cool. It has this very kind of like nice, like independent poppy feel that I think is working really well. And I think the vocals, just in general, I think you did a really solid job. They just need to be a little bit more present in the mix. That's the wrong link. Let me try this again. All right, so next up we got a track by Mike. Mike, anything you want to tell us about this track? Anything in particular? No, 100% does not need to be in English. In fact, a lot of the music I'm listening to right now is not in English. Nice, Mike. That's a super interesting track here. I like what you got going on here. I like this kind of like dark, brooding, cinematic feel to it. It's really interesting. Couple things that I've noticed. Number one, it feels like the arrangement could use a little bit of massaging. I feel like you kind of start with these like bouncy vocally parts and these string parts. First off, the strings to me feel very sampled. They feel like just sampled versions of strings, like something out of Contact or something like that. So I'm not sure where you grab the strings from. But one of the things I found, because I've been in a situation before where I've got some strings and they sound okay, but they're software strings, is find somebody who plays cello or violin or something like that, and just pay them to record on top of what you already have written. And that way you get one layer that is the kind of sampled string, and then you have another layer that's somebody actually playing strings. And if you don't know anybody who plays cello or violin, you can just, online, you can search for people and you can just pay them to record on top of your track. And I think that'll help make the fake strings feel more real, and it can be really valuable to kind of like create that nice, like fully cinematic effect to it. The other issue is it feels like you kind of like drop off the intro into kind of the B section when the kind of like heartbeat drums come in. Right around here. I feel like that transition can be a little bit more interesting. It feels like the strings just kind of fade out, and then the other sounds just kind of fade out, and then there's like a quick reset, and then some new sounds come in. I think you could play with this idea a little bit more, and maybe have the strings kind of fade out over a longer period of time, or maybe have other elements you introduce in the intro to keep it kind of moving and flowing, and maybe also add in some other kinds of transitionary sounds, maybe some like filter sweeps, like either filters going down or filters going up, to help make this transition feel a little bit more impactful, because right now it feels like everything just kind of ends and then it just restarts with some new sounds right afterwards. So I think that transition could use a little bit of work. I also feel like rhythmically there's a lot of interesting things you could do here if you wanted to. This is more of like a personal preference kind of taste thing more than anything else. If you wanted to put more percussive elements in there beyond that kind of like heartbeat kick drum, that could be a really cool way to expand upon what you already have. And then my other major piece of feedback is I love the guitar. The guitar is sick. The guitar adds so much character and personality to this track. And it really feels like that's really what this track is all about, is the guitar, and everything else just kind of like building up to it. However, the guitar just kind of like starts out of nowhere. So it's just doing this thing. And then the guitar just comes in. So I think you could lead into that guitar a little bit more with some notes in this kind of like 1 minute to minute 45 second period where you're not giving them the whole guitar thing, but maybe just like a couple of notes here and there, or maybe even just some kind of like, you could even sample some of the distortion from the guitar and use that as like a background sound to kind of like foreshadow that the guitar is about to come in. I think it'd be really cool. That might not be one. You might like the idea of that guitar just kind of coming in and just taking over everything, in which case keep it the way it is. But basically from when the guitar comes in onward, I think you're crushing it. I think it's just... Yeah, I love the whole guitar solo. I think from there on you're good. But I think that doing some more layering with the strings could be really useful. Working on that transition, and then maybe previewing some of the guitar before you bring it in fully could be really, really helpful. I like that this is available for the very affordable price of $1,000 US. It's a pro move right there. Yeah, that's kind of what I think about this track. I think it's really cool. I think it feels like you're kind of trying to like combine like this like cinematic kind of soundtrack kind of sound into this kind of like dirty heavy metal guitar solo, which I think is two things that can work really well together and definitely have worked well together in the past. So I think it sounds pretty awesome. hopefully that's helpful to you. Yeah, appreciate it. I appreciate you always popping by the stream and the videos and things. Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna put in your work, might as well get paid for it. One of the things that this does do, though, it does make me like, I definitely want to hear more of something like this. I feel like it has like a really unique style to it, and that's a good sign if I'm like, well, this is cool. I want to kind of see like, where do you go in other songs? Do you go more the like, you know, heavy metal route? Do you go the more cinematic route? Like, I'm assuming that's you shredding on the guitar there, so I'm assuming there's more guitar in more of your other tracks. Cool. All right, so this is Tripathi, and you said something about the vocals. Ignore the vocals. Like, are you gonna fully replace the vocals, or are you just not done processing them? Yeah, guitar solos are dope. I think that sometimes you just get something really raw and natural with those first takes too.
रोज
काजल जले आँख में जिस तरह ख्वाब का
Nice. That's a pretty dope track. I got a couple questions for you, Chapati, though. Number one, what language are you speaking or singing, I guess? And I'm assuming that's you singing as well. Also, what are your influences? Nice. Yeah, I thought it was Hindi, but I was like, could be totally wrong there. Because I think there's a lot of different directions you could go with this in terms of production. So let me start with the things that I really liked. I do feel like the piano and a lot of the like melodic elements in this work really, really well. I think those are really strong. I think also there's a part in here where we have like a harp thing going on that is also working really well for me. So I'm melodically, you're like really pretty, like really on point. In terms of production, I think there's two things that really stand out to me besides the vocals that need a little bit up. Yeah, the harp sounds great. Where in India are you from, by the way, if you don't mind me asking? Number one is you have this pad sound, this kind of like atmospheric guy going on. That's kind of just kind of like sitting in the background a little bit. Nice. Yeah, I've been to Delhi, but it was like 15 years ago. So this pad sound is working for me. It's not too sharp. It just always exists, basically. And it also has a little bit of this kind of like 80s, kind of reminds me of like the Twin Peaks soundtrack. I don't know if you ever watched the show Twin Peaks, but they have this like 80s FM synthesis kind of pad sound. And I feel like it's just, I think number one, you could get really experimental with the sound design here and like do something way more sci-fi with it. That's kind of what I was asking, like what your influences are, like how experimental do you want to get with it? Yeah, it has this very FM kind of sound to it. It's like classic FM sound. So I think you could get way more experimental with it. And to me personally, I think that'd be super cool. I don't know if you want to go that far with it. If you want to get more kind of like sci-fi, cyberpunk sound design with it, I think that could be really cool. But at the very least, I think at certain sections of the song, maybe at least filter it out. So that way it's just not always present. I think that to me, when I listen to this arrangement, there's always piano or something melodic. There's always drums, and there's always that pad sound, and there's mostly always the vocals. So by removing things, you can create these nice sections where it feels like you're in a different place. You're in a different like chapter of the story. Yeah, like a low pass filter. That way, like it's still present there. It's still there a little bit, but you're like kind of moving it to the background in terms of what you're paying attention to. So I feel like that pad sound. It's like it's not here, but it's like only for a second. So yeah, autofilter would be perfect for something like that. I just think when we're talking about music, negative space I think is really important, right? It's not just the notes you play, but it's also the space in between those notes. It's like what notes do you not play? It's a very like jazz way of looking at it. But I think that using negative space here by reducing the number of sounds that you have allows you to take your listener on a journey through more different places. And right now, this arrangement feels like it kind of starts in one place and then just stays through that one place the whole way through. So I think you could experiment with removing more things. Maybe have a section that's like just vocals for like 4 bars or 8 bars, or just that harp sound. So it like creates a different energy or a different kind of focus on the arrangement. So negative space, especially with that pad sound / a little bit of sound design tweaking on the pad sound to maybe make it a little bit more out there, I think could be really cool. And then the other big thing that stood out to me besides the pad sound were the drums. To me, the drums sound like the standard 808 drum kit without any processing, which is not bad. That's a fantastic drum kit. But I think if you're going to go that route, putting some effects on there, even if it's something basic like some, so you're asking about, could the pad sound, does that be dynamic too? Yeah, for sure. Rhythmic, like instead of having it just rhythmically play long sounds, make it so that it, those notes end and then there's space in between them. That could also be really helpful. Yeah, it like I said, it sounds like the generic 808 kit, which, like I said, is a classic drum kit. That's why everybody uses it. But I think if you're going to use it, put some effects on it, and that way it doesn't sound quite as generic. Or start swapping out some of the drum sounds with other drum sounds that you like. And this also kind of comes down to like, what are your influences? Like, where direction do you want to take this? Do you want to go more like a pop music route? Do you want to go more like a hip hop route with it? Do you want to go more of a like traditional like rock music route with it in terms of what the drums sound like? There's a lot of different places you go with it, and I think it's up to you to kind of figure out what your own kind of personal take on what the drums will be like for this. But as far as effects, I mean, real basic drum processing would probably include a little bit of reverb on things like the snare, compressors. There's the really fantastic drum bus audio effect in live that's really niceful. Yeah, so I would take a listen to some of the music you use as your influences, like whether it's pop music or whatever, and really listen to what the drums sound like. Do they sound acoustic? Do they sound synthetic? And then layering up your drums, processing them a little bit more. Even on some of like your percussive sounds, putting some like delay on it so they can like bounce around a little bit can kind of be kind of fun. There's a lot of different directions you could take with it, but to me it sounds like you put a lot of love into your chords and your melodies and all those parts. It sounds like you have like some traditional training in that world, but the drums, but the drums I think could use a little bit of love, a little bit of processing, and I think you could get weird with it and try some interesting sample selection choices, and that might take you in interesting directions. In the same way, doing some nice, yeah. Well, your chords and your melodies are crushing it, so you're doing really great there. And I think the rhythm of your drums is totally fine, but it's just the sound of your drums. They just sound a little bit generic, and I think that a little bit of processing and or layering is the other thing that I do. I made one of the earlier videos I did on the channel was about drum layering and how you can just stack multiple drums on a single pad in a drum rack, and that's probably the easiest way just to get a little bit more out of your drums if you're using like a basic drum kit like this. I probably wouldn't use the auto panner on drums unless it was like a background drum sound, like maybe on like a percussive sound, like a shaker or something like that. Your main drums you want to keep mostly in the middle, especially your kick and the snare. But yeah, like I said, I think it's a cool track. A little bit more negative space and arrangement. Work on the pad sound, work on the drums, and then it sounds like you're going to redo the vocals anyway. So I'll let you kind of handle that. But yeah, it's a cool track. Sweet. So any other thoughts, questions, feedback, ideas, anything? Also, I think we've gotten through everybody in the spreadsheet. It looks like, Mike, you just added another track. So we can get into that. But if anybody else is out there in the stream and wants to get feedback on a track, just hit the link that is pinned at the top and just paste your link in there, and I will take a listen to it. So Mike was saying about why the guitar solo section cuts through pure human soul versus ones and zeros, the rest of the tune. Yeah, I can see that. I think there's something to be said about like surprising your audience, Mike, when it comes to like a big element like the guitar solo like that. Sometimes you want to prepare them for it, and sometimes you want to be like, boom, here it is all at once, which I think is a totally legit creative choice. Yeah, Chapati, me and my family are okay. I actually just had my second COVID vaccine the other day. So yesterday I was in bed all day just recovering from that. But I'm doing all right. Hopefully you as well are doing okay. And your family too, if you have any family still in India. I know things are kind of crazy over there right now. Cool. So it looks like we're all caught up on the spreadsheet for songs. So I'm going to do this another track from Mike. But again, if anybody has just shown up and they want to share a track, just feel free to put it in the spreadsheet link to the top. Yeah, that's what I keep hearing, is that India's having a tough time with it right now. This on here. All right, so let's take a listen to another track by Mike.
J'ai étudié le ballet pendant des années.
Dope. Definitely wanted it to be longer than that, but I think that there's something to be said about an arrangement where you're leaving your listener wanting more, which I think is a totally legit way to do it. But yeah, I think there's a lot more of area you could explore there. But I like it. I like the experimental nature of it. I like the kind of noisiness of it. I like the non-traditional arrangement style of it. I think really the two main things that were bothering me were kind of the same thing. I do think there's a lot to be said about noise and using noise in different artistic ways. In fact, I actually listen to a lot of noise music, but it did feel like two of your noisy sounds were a little bit. There's some frequencies there. There's some noise in there that I thought was good noise and was really interesting, and there was some noise in there that I was like, this is actually not my favorite. So here. It sounds like some low frequency white noise that honestly I might, if it were up to me, I might EQ out a little bit. And then over here, it's a little bit of high frequency noise that I don't think you need to get rid of, but I do think it could be quieter in volume. So it's like two different noisy sounds in two different places that have kind of opposite issues, in my opinion. I think, like I said, I don't think you need to get rid of it because I think there's something to be said about using noise and distortion as an artistic choice. But I think you could tone down a tiny bit and I would not mind that. But other than that, I really liked it. Actually, the start here almost reminds me kind of like there's an intro to a Justice song that kind of starts like this, has a very similar sound, and then goes into like a bunch of French house. Love the little reverse piano here. Again, this is also part of it. This is part that like sounds a little, that noise you're using is a little bit too much for my taste. Yeah. There's also a little bit of weird dynamic stuff going on with your guitar. And again, I'm not sure how much of this is intentional versus non-intentional. Some of the guitar parts, some of the guitar lines feel significantly quieter and some feel significantly louder than others. And I do think that there is something really cool about that. So again, I don't want you to totally change that, but I think you could dial it in a little bit, like you could compress it a little bit so they're not quite so different in dynamics. But also, I don't think that's a huge deal. I think it's pretty nitpicky. But yeah, I love the guitar here. I think in both your tracks, the guitars shine as one of, if not the best parts of them. And in both of your tracks, I want more of them. So I kind of get a better sense of what your style is now a little bit, which is interesting. But yeah, it's a cool track. So yeah, so Tripathi, I think as long as nobody else is putting in tracks who hasn't gone yet, you're totally welcome to double dip. I think that's totally fine. I did not hear, I wasn't listening specifically. So Tripathi was asking, how have I trained my ear so finely? Honestly, I just listen to lots and lots of music, and I'm very nerdy about how to make things. And I think it's mostly just experience more than anything else. I think I listen to a lot of music, and then I probably more importantly than anything else, I talk to people about music a lot. And I think that making music is one skill set, and I think talking about music is almost a separate skill set, because you can creatively, intuitively make things and kind of know what you're looking for, know what you're going for, but then having to explain it to somebody in a way that actually makes sense is much more difficult in many cases. So I think that's mostly how I refine my ear, is just talking to people about music. And I think I listen to a lot of amateur music as well as professional music. Like I have a lot of students I work with who are at different stages in their artistic careers, people who are brand new at the beginning and people who are really, really experienced. And I can kind of see all of those things. I see what things work and what things don't work for different people at different times in their kind of like creative journey. I think that's also been really helpful for me kind of figuring out what I'm listening to and understanding what I'm hearing and being able to communicate about what I'm hearing. I actually think my ear could still use a lot of development. Like I don't have, there's a lot of things I could still work on, I think. So Tripathi, on your track, it did feel like the vocals were a little underprocessed. I definitely think that a little bit of reverb probably wouldn't hurt. Let me go back and check it one more time. Yeah, I think two things you could do. Number one is a little bit of reverb. A little bit of reverb on vocals can go a long way, especially if you get your reverb settings like just right. It can make all the difference in the world. The other thing you could do is layering. Having multiple, like take multiple recordings of yourself singing and layer them together. And then that can also really help kind of beef up your vocals and make it sound a little richer and a little fuller, because the different nuances in different recordings, or even doing like harmonizations on different recordings can be really, really useful. I couldn't really tell the delay so much. Yeah, the delay feels very subtle if it's on there. Yeah, it definitely has like a little bit of like a Brazilian feel to it. You could totally go a more Brazilian route if you want to do a little bit of a, what's that sound? Bossa Nova. You could totally bring a little Bossa Nova in here. All right. Cool, so it looks like we're going back to another Chapati track. Yeah, let me make sure this link works. All right, let me pull this up here. And again, anybody who is just joining us and wants to share a track, there is a spreadsheet pinned at the top, and you can just follow that link, put in your link, and I will take a listen to whatever you got. All right, so let me, yeah, I think this works. Anything that I can just stream off of the internet, I think should work.
तुम्हारी मेरी बात
Nice. Yeah, I think what you're doing here is really solid. I feel like a lot of the feedback I have is going to be mostly kind of mix related. It did feel like your drums were a little bit loud. Yeah, the vocals are great. I think the vocals are crushing it. But I think that your drums, I think your kick and snare are mostly where you want them to be. I think they could be a tiny bit quieter, but I think all of your other percussion, like your hats and your cymbals and things like that, I think can go way down in volume. Yeah, but all of the cymbals I think are way too loud and ends up kind of being really distracting. It also sounds like you're doing some really interesting things with panning on your drums, some of which I think is really cool, and some of it I'm not quite as into. I think that, to me, it sounds like the snare is a little bit to the right side, but I could be wrong about that. Yeah, I would maybe move the snare a little bit closer to the center of the mix. That's a really minor thing. I wouldn't stress about that too much, but it did feel like a little bit off to one side. Yeah, I think I personally like the snare to be mostly in the middle, if not entirely in the middle, but that's a little bit to one side you can totally get away with for sure. And I do think the vocal processing here is pretty on point. I don't know if you used any reverb on it or not, but once again, if you want to give your vocals a little bit more of like a lush, fuller feeling, I feel like a little bit of reverb with the right settings, I think could go a really long way. I think the vocals are pretty solid the way they are. Yeah, my big issue is just the drums are just taking over everything, so it's really hard to hear some of the other things. So I think once you turn down the drums, it'll make everything else a lot clearer. You also, whatever this guy is, that weird string thing you're using there, it sounds like one of those like Chinese one-string instruments, but I don't know what it's actually called. More of that would be really cool. I think it's a really cool sound, and I think it doesn't really get featured anywhere else. You get the little flute guy. Yeah, that thing's dope. I think more of that adds a lot of interesting character to it, because it feels like mostly what I'm hearing is the drums and the vocals, and I can hear the melodic part, but they're getting lost behind a little bit. The bass line is also getting a little bit lost in there, so I think, again, it'll be a little hard to tell. I think once you turn the drums down, you'll be able to hear everything a lot better, including the bass, but I think maybe a little bit more volume on the bass could also be helpful, but not too much. But yeah, I think it's a cool track. I think everything you have here is working. I do feel like, once again, you could kind of expand out this arrangement a little bit more, but I don't think that's totally necessary. I think you could kind of end it here if you wanted to. But yeah, really, really solid work on this. It's interesting listening to these drums versus the drums from your last track, because they're a totally different thing. These are very like acoustic sounding drum samples, because you're going for more of that kind of acoustic feel. And that's kind of what I was talking about a little bit when you're just dealing with the generic 808 kit, is that it, like, you could go different directions with it. You could go more synthetic with it, or you could go more acoustic with it, or you could go somewhere in between, as long as you do some kind of processing here. Yeah, I mean, it does sound like a little bit like a generic acoustic kit, and I think a little bit of processing on it probably wouldn't hurt you, or layering. But yeah, really, really solid work there. I think, just hearing that shows me that you kind of know what to do with vocals. You know how to make them sound good. So you totally have it within your power with the other track to get the vocals dialed in. Cool. So yeah, no worries. It looks like once again we are at the end of the songs people have submitted. So we'll see. If you guys want, we can just go ahead and talk about any other topic you're interested in. If you guys have questions or things you want to talk about that are music related, I'm also open to that. No, Tripathi, I didn't have time to go through my hard drive and find vocal samples, unfortunately. Yeah, Patrick, if you want to share something, there is a spreadsheet that is linked at the top. Should be pinned at the top. Just go in there, put in the link, and I will take a listen to it. Mikey, I can totally share one of my tracks. I think of any works in progress that are not released yet that I want to release at some point. Let me see if I can pull one up while Patrick puts one in there. I guess Patrick is faster than I am. So we'll do Patrick's first, and then if I have time, I will share one of my tracks. I don't have a Magnus Opus right now. I've got a bunch of weird experimental music I'm working on right now that is not ready to be released. Patrick, anything in particular you're looking for feedback on? Also, anytime I see somebody's doing hip hop, it's helpful to know if you are the one rapping on it or not. No vocals. Nice. I think you got a lot of interesting stuff going on here, and I think a lot of your layers work together really well. However, the big glaring thing that I'm noticing here is you have a recycling issue where it sounds like you came up with some cool ideas and then you repeated them in different combinations for the entire arrangement, but nothing ever really changes. Nothing ever really grows or evolves or becomes something different. Yeah, I think that, for example, the bass line, it starts at the beginning and it never really changes. And I think there's certain points where it like goes away briefly. Yeah, the bass line, so it's not just that the bass line repeats, it's that it's the same notes in the same order and the same timing every single time. And so I think if the bass line were to change a little bit, either rhythmically or melodically, it would open up a whole world for you. Same thing is true with the drum beats. The drum beat starts at the beginning. And it just does the same thing throughout the whole song. So specifically with the drums and the bass, creating multiple variations of a clip and then being able to switch back and forth is a really, really powerful tool for arrangement. And just to kind of show you, a lot of times in my process of like making music, if say, this is, I'm just gonna pretend this is a bass line that I'm writing. Like here's my beautiful, oops, that's supposed to be slightly longer than that. Do something like that. And that, and that. Okay, so let's pretend this is my bass line. If you're working on a clip like this, whether it's session view or arrangement view, just duplicate the entire clip. And then on this version, maybe we'll have maybe the exact same thing, but every note will be shorter. Except for these ones will stay. And that way, as I am going through and like building out my arrangement, I can jump back and forth between these two ideas. Or maybe I'll have twice as many notes. So I'll have basically all these notes repeat themselves by doing something like that. So like sonically, it's mostly the same thing, but rhythmically, it's doing something slightly different. So starting with one core idea as like your basic starting point, and then creating multiple variations that are either rhythmic, or you could do something simple like pitch it up or down an octave, or some notes up and down an octave. So maybe we could take like every other one of these notes, oops. And if you hit shift and up or shift and down, pitch those up an octave. So I now have one version of the bass line that kind of like jumps back and forth between different notes like that. So either playing different notes or playing different rhythms. Yes, variations, to me, making lots of variations equates better arrangements because you can switch back and forth between different ideas and kind of like create this emotional arc or this journey for your listener where things are changing over time. So the big places I noticed it primarily were the drums and the bass, because those don't really change at all. At least with your melodic parts, you switch between a couple different melodic parts. There's like this one, and there's this one. And then you also have this like electric piano guy in the background. The electric piano guy, I love. He's great. More electric piano in everything. But you could also do a similar thing with, especially there's a few moments where it just plays the same melody over and over and over again. Like right here. It's like, I love all the other sounds and I love all the other things you have going on here. But that melody just keeps going and it never changes. So maybe you have certain situations where you just switch up a couple notes. Can be really, really useful to create mostly the same emotional response, but making it feel a little different. And I think that's the big thing you can do with this track, where the drums change at some point, the bass changes at some point, at different parts of it, and then potentially also some of the melody parts, because the melodies do feel like they go on a long time and they're carrying a lot of work for the track. But other than that, like I said, I really like electric piano. I think your vocal samples are a little weird, but they also kind of work for me. So at first I wasn't sure about them, but you kind of made them work after a while. I love these little breaks that you have. Love the electric piano. Yeah, same thing with their hi-hats. More variation in the hi-hats I think would do you a lot of good. And then you can probably condense this arrangement down probably to like 3.5 minutes instead of 4 minutes. And I don't necessarily think that would be bad. I think that would allow you to kind of like get through the different elements of your song and make it feel like at the end you're good. You probably weren't here earlier for the stream, Patrick, but Mike, who shared 2 songs, both of his arrangements were too short. But I think it's much better to have songs that are much too short than much too long. If something is too short, people will just listen to it again. But if something's too long, they're not going to, they're going to get bored and they're going to switch off and go to the next song. Henry, yeah, you can totally toss a song into the spreadsheet. It should be pinned at the top of the chat for putting in a song. Overall, Patrick, I think the mix feels pretty good. I think the only thing that really kind of sticks out for me mix-wise is the hats feel a little bit too loud, and that's just a really common thing that I hear in a lot of mixes. I feel like most everything else feels pretty good. I think the vocals sound pretty good. Yeah, I think the drums, besides the hats, feel pretty solid in the mix, and the melody and everything sounds pretty good. Yeah, I think overall the mix is pretty solid. It's just the percussion, the hats and things are a little bit too loud. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing that track. Yeah, Tripathi, I will maybe for next Tuesday's stream, I'll make sure to spend some time talking about vocal processing. Well, Henry, anything specific for you want us to take a listen for? Nice. This is a super cool track. Really kind of weird, almost kind of like glitch hoppy, but not quite glitch hop, just like weird hip hop. I think overall, the things that I really like are all of the weird sounds you're using. I think are amazing. Like this part sounds really cool. All your little like sound effect fills are working really well. I think overall, all of the weirdness is like just the right amount of like weird, but also still makes sense rhythmically and fits in really well. I think the two things you could probably work on the most are your kick and your bass line. To me, the kick has this very like mid-range kind of thud to it. That like I'm really not into, and it's almost kind of distracting. And I think what I want is to hear like a big, beefier sounding kick. So I think the kick sample selection could use a little bit of work, and I think that'll make a huge difference in terms of the power and the impact of the drum beat. Because I don't know, I hear this and I won't kind of naturally want you to go a little bit more kind of like glitch hop kind of direction with it, but that's my own personal bias. But right now, I think the kick is not doing it for me. Oh, we're getting a feedback loop. All right, got the feedback loop. Give me a second, make sure my mic's still working. Yeah, a little bit more low end to it. Like right now, I think the kick that I'm hearing here. Yeah, I don't know if I was into the feedback loop. I don't know why it does that randomly. Like when the kick is happening at the same time as the my computer sometimes randomly does feedback loops when I'm streaming like this, and I'm not sure why. But when the kick is happening with the bass line, it's not as noticeable. But when the times when the kick is happening just by itself, especially these first couple kicks in here, it feels off to me. So I think one with a little bit more low end, I think will be good. You could even just layer it on top of the one you already have. You don't even need to do anything else about that. And then your bass line. There's nothing wrong with their bass line, but I do think that you could get a lot more interesting with it. And I think this is especially noticeable because I think that a lot of your like mid-range and high-range sounds are doing all kinds of weird, wacky things, and then your bass line is just kind of like playing the same note over and over again. So I think there's different directions you could take it with it, but I think that sound design-wise, if you wanted to go more of like a bass music kind of direction with your bass line, I wouldn't mind it. I think that would sound really cool and give it a little bit more energy. But I love all these other sounds. All these other sounds are amazing. Especially, there's like a weird squonky sound that's happening in the background here that I think could be a little bit louder. I think it's a really cool sound, and I think it deserves a little bit more attention. And this part's great. The kick doesn't bother me as much in the second half for some reason, but I do think and then here it does kind of bother me. So when the kick is happening at the same time as the bass line, it's not as big of a deal. But when the kick is happening by itself, it definitely kind of sticks out to me. I love the flute. I think the flute into the outro, it's great. Yeah, I think, like I said, the kick needs a little bit of love, and then optionally, the bass line, I think you could go some different interesting directions with it that could be really fun, that would be very different, but could also work. Like I said, like a little more kind of like bass music-y. Trying to think if I have any good like references for something that would kind of give you the right idea. I'll have to think about it. But this is a super dope track. I really like what you're doing here. It's got this kind of like goofy, silly, playful feel, which I think is working for me. Maybe listen to some like Igloo Ghost. His stuff is a little bit more off the wall than yours is, but I think in terms of like bass lines and making weird bass lines that go with weird music, that might be a good kind of like reference to have. But yeah, thanks for sharing that. All right, how's everybody doing out there? Everybody still alive? Yeah, Igloo Ghost, I think, is one of the best producers out there right now. Awesome. Well, I hope everybody is excited for their weekend and is going to do nice things like make music and just be able to hang out. Yeah, Igloo Ghost is definitely worth checking out. A lot of his like ambient stuff, I think, is also really, really good. Cool. So it looks like we are all caught up on the spreadsheet. So I might hang out for a little bit longer and see if anybody else shows up. But I appreciate you guys all coming in here and sharing really awesome stuff. Henry, have you been releasing these publicly? Yeah, this has been a good stream. Everybody's been having some really cool, really interesting tracks. Are you gonna keep working on the arrangement for the track, Henry? Or are you gonna like add some more parts to it? Or are you just gonna end it here? Nice. Yeah, I think it sounds really good. And I think the arrangement works really well too. It's got like that nice length where it's like you get the idea, but you don't get overwhelmed by it. Cool. So I think, like I said, I think we got through everybody's tracks for today. I really appreciate you guys all showing up and submitting tracks. Keep in mind that if you in the future can't make one of these streams and you want to submit a track, if you're in the Discord, you have access to the spreadsheet early. So that way you can submit a song early and then I'll do it at the start of the stream. So you can kind of guarantee it. And if you can't make it to the stream, these all get posted later on. So if you guys want to go back and check out your tracks, you can totally do that. I guess I can play one of mine since you guys were interested. Let me find it. Yeah, Mike, I think it's a really fun thing to do, just to kind of like hear what people are working on, check out what people are doing, hear things in progress. All right, let me set this up so you guys can hear it. I don't remember if this is the fully mixed version or not. It looks like it's maybe mixed but not mastered, so we'll see what it sounds like. I have no idea what genre this is. Yeah, so I was working on that a while ago, and then I haven't paid attention to it recently, so I should probably go back in there and finish. I'm going to tweak a few things, finish mixing it, and then we'll probably, hopefully, release it sometime soon. I've been really lazy about releasing things. But yeah, I have no idea what genre this would be. How did I make this? Maybe I'll do like a song deconstruction stream sometime. I think it mostly just started from the drum beat. I think it was just finger drumming at a drum beat. And then what else is in here? Those vocal things are from, I think the Output has a plugin called something with vocals, something that to do with vocals. So it's from that Output plugin. But yeah, I'm super into polyrhythms right now. I'm super into like different like weird percussive stuff. That's like the main thing I care about when I listen for music right now. Besides authenticity is percussion. If it has authenticity and it has percussion, I'm like super down with it. So I'm focusing a lot on percussion these days. Yeah, exhale. That's the one. I'm exactly right, Henry. But yeah, I'll finish this up hopefully sometime soon and then get it out into the world. You guys are inspiring me to actually finish this up and get it out there. This also means I gotta start something new this week, and so I can have something to share next week if you guys want to hear something. So when I hear a track, I want to feel like I can learn something about the artist by listening to it. And I used to think originality was super, super important, but I don't think originality is important anymore, or if it even really exists. So I've kind of shifted my perspective in terms of how I judge music from originality to authenticity. So if I feel like the person who's making the song is being real and just expressing themselves in a really honest way, that's, I think, the most important, the number one factor for how I decide whether I like a track or not, more than anything else. It's a little more complicated than that, but I think there's a lot of things that go into how I judge a track, or how I figure out if a track is good or not. But I think the number one thing is authenticity. And it's one of my biggest issues with a lot of the kind of like, especially mainstream EDM world, or even sometimes the hip hop world, where the track can be produced really well, but it doesn't have the I'm not feeling whatever it is they're trying to say, because it doesn't feel authentic. Yeah, vulnerability is also really important. As far as like originality versus, first off, vulnerability is really hard to do. And it's also like one of the scariest things you can do. If you can like make a song where you're actually really vulnerable in it, it's terrifying, but it's also super rewarding. And it's very, like I said, it's very hard to do. But as far as like originality versus authenticity, because I think part of the reason I started like thinking about it that way is there's certain genres that are very kind of dialed in what you can do. For example, like drum and bass. Like drum and bass has a bunch of like strict rules, not super, like sometimes very strict, sometimes not so strict rules in terms of how you make drum and bass. So if you're making drum and bass, it's really hard to be original if you're making a drum and bass track. But that being said, there's still people out there who are making brand new drum and bass tracks that sound really, they sound really awesome. And it's because they, authentically really love drum and bass, and they really understand what it is they're trying to do. And I think it's true for a lot of genres. Yeah, being vulnerable and being authentic with instrumental music is super tricky to do, but if you can do it, it's like that's the magic spot. I definitely feel like I want to make a video for the channel talking about authenticity and vulnerability and music, and how important I think it is, because I think it doesn't get talked about really at all. And I think, again, in a lot of like mainstream styles of music, it tends to be totally forgotten about. Yeah, Chapati, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for sharing tracks. Again, thanks to everybody for coming by and sharing your tracks. I think I'm going to call it for the evening. You guys have a good weekend. Appreciate you guys. Love all you guys. It's super inspiring to hear what everybody's working on. It makes me want to like get in and make some more stuff. Yeah, Mike, I totally agree with that. The unquantized, authentic performance is sometimes the most, honest one. Cool. Well, I'll see you guys. I'll be back on Tuesday for another just random production stream stuff, and then song feedback stream again on Friday. But yeah, thanks to all you guys for showing up. And if you're not part of the Discord, join the Discord. I'm trying to figure out how to grow that whole situation. But yeah, I will see you guys later on. Have a good night.